Today, I'm going to be listing the top 5 current best teams as of 1.0 in Wuthering Waves. To preface, I will be talking about Verena and Baizha a lot. Pretty much every single team wants one of them due to being the only two characters that buffs damage of all types without being removed on a switch. So instead of it being on an outro skill, where if you swap off the character that you have swapped into, the buff will go away, they happen globally, so every single unit will be buffed regardless of if you switch off or whatever. There may be alternatives, however, in the vast majority of cases, they are going to be the most viable options. In the case where you have both, Verena will be stronger. I'm going to be referring the slot as support, so if I mention support, that will usually mean I'm referring to either Verena or Baizha. If anything confuses you, you disagree, or have any questions at all about the game, then you can find my Twitch in the description where we can have a real conversation about it. At number 5, I have a team that I have called the free-to-play standard, as it completely uses characters that you get free. They are guaranteed characters you get either the convene, using Baizha, your first convene, or the story gives them to you. Characters like yuurou you might get from completing the Tower of Adversity. This team consists of Rover, Yang Yang, and Baizha. The general gist is to move from Baizha to Yang Yang to Rover, charging and using all of your outro skills and your liberations, your ultimates, whilst weaving in basic attacks to charge up your outro skill liberation more. This team can be changed in a few ways, as you get more characters. You basically want to look for characters that can fit into one of the archetypes that a character currently fills. Rover can be replaced with better main DPSs like Danjin or the Havoc Rover after completing the later parts of the main quest. He's probably the weakest part of this team, so getting a unit to replace him early on would be pretty useful, but this team stands on its own, even as is, and will be able to complete pretty much all of the main story quests in my opinion. Yang Yang can be replaced with hybrid units like Sanhua, Mortefi, or even yuurou to keep it free to play. The synergies between main DPSs and hybrid units is super important, with Sanhua wanting a character who uses basic attacks and Mortefi wanting someone that does heavy attacks. Baizha doesn't really have a replacement other than Verena, who you should upgrade into if you have the opportunity. If you're trying to create a third team, and this is the third team, and you don't have Verena or Baizha, then Zhanjin could work, however it would be a downgrade from them in my opinion. That does it for number 5. In number 4, I have Calcharo, Mortefi, and a supporting unit. This team, in my opinion, struggles from not having the super tight synergy that other teams have. Calcharo's damage numbers are crazy, but you also may struggle to perfectly execute his attacks in a real-world setting, especially with switch cancels if you want to fully make use of him. He also uses a range of attacks. They all source from his Resonance Liberation, but he uses a mix of basic attacks and heavy attacks whilst in it, so there's not really a buffer that can fully support him as of yet. In spite of this, Calcharo's strength is clear. His damage numbers speak for themselves, and he's 100% worth building if you have the opportunity and you're committed to learning the intricacies of the unit. His string, whilst on field, heavily relies on his liberation, which is also another of his largest drawbacks if you haven't invested into him enough to get the energy regen that you need. You'll generally be rotating from your support to Mortefi and finishing with Calcharo. The most important part of using Calcharo at his most optimal is swapping into someone else after using his charge attacks, in order to deal additional damage and charge some, your outro skill, your liberation, whilst he's stuck in a long animation that you can't really do anything else in. At number 3, I have Danjin, Mortefi, and a support. This is pretty similar to the previous team, except it uses Danjin instead. Danjin is an extremely competent carry that burns her own health to deal increased damage. She's a risky unit, but currently stands as one of the stronger units if you can manage that risk. Your support and Mortefi will use their strings before swapping to Danjin. Danjin will be using her skill a lot, whilst occasionally weaving in basic attacks in order to burn her health and maximize damage. If you're missing Mortefi, then the Havoc Rover can actually be somewhat viable on this team despite having a slight anti-synergy with Danjin. This is due to them both wanting a lot of field time. Danjin's outro skill, however, does apply damage deepen to Havoc on her outro skill. Obviously synergizes pretty well with the Havoc Rover. At number 2, I have Encore, Sanhua, and a support character. Encore and Sanhua's synergy is crazy. Sanhua's outro skill is a key part of their synergy, offering a 38% basic attack damage deepen, which is where the bulk of Encore's damage comes from. This coupled with Sanhua's short rotation times, if you land her upgraded charge attacks, makes them easily one of the strongest teams in the game in spite of their currently underrated status. Another character that could slot into this team, and loves to eat up time on field and basic attack, is the Havoc Rover, which turns the team into something super free to play friendly, again with all of the characters being available without a single convene being used, provided you use Baizha. I personally think Sanhua's difficulty is overstated, so replacing Encore with Havoc Rover could make a pretty strong team whilst allowing you to not have to try hard and play super difficult characters. As an honorable mention, I have what I'm going to call the Electro Standard team, as it uses Caocharo, Yinlin, and then a support character. The problem is this team isn't technically in the game yet, as we get Yinlin in the second half of 1.0, but it is probably the strongest team in the game, provided Yinlin doesn't change too much from the last CBT we saw her in. This is due to Yinlin being insanely powerful in her own right, and additionally buffing Caocharo into one of the strongest DPSs in the game. Obviously this is because she buffs electro damage, which means Caocharo finally would have a buffer that buffs every single aspect of his kit, rather than just basic attacks or charge attacks. As Yinlin isn't in the game yet, this is why it's an honorable mention and not actually in a 1, 2, 3 or whatever place. Finally, at number 1, I have Jian, Mortefi, and the support. This team is just crazy strong and pretty easy to use, which is why I've listed it at number 1. Anyone can use it, anyone can find it fun, it's a fun team. Jian has one of the highest DPSs out of any other character in the game, while still being a pretty easy character to control and use. As you get more copies of other standard banner characters or 4 stars, they have the potential to be stronger than if you have just one copy of Jian. In spite of this, Jian's synergy with Mortefi will also lend well to him being a top tier character for at least the first few patches of 1.x. In terms of replacements, you could replace Mortefi with Alto, but with Mortefi on Jian's banner you probably have him, and Alto is a little bit more difficult to get right now. The main case for having Alto on the team over Mortefi is if you want Mortefi for another team, or you just like Alto, and you're already clearing the damage checks that the content you're clearing has. If you're already dealing enough damage even with Alto, then there's not really much point to having Mortefi on the team, and he's probably better in another team provided you're clearing the Tower of Adversity. If this helped you understand the game a bit better and help you pick a team that you want to use, then please subscribe. I'll be making more guides and lists like this in the future, so stick around. Thank you for watching, I'll see you next time, goodbye.